I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 2 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast, Too Much of a Good Thing. Speaking of too much of a good thing, you know what you can't have too much of?
What?
5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts.
Can't get enough of those.
Can't get enough. There's plenty of you that listen that have maybe clicked like a 5-star rating, but we are a little bit lacking in the reviews. That helps our SEO. That helps like our podcast in general. People are asking, do you have sponsorships? Like, guys, we'd love it to get there, but we need a little help. So tell your friends, share episodes, rate it, review it, write something spectacular like my clients on The Knot.
Okay. All right. So we'll get there. So we're going to talk about too much of a good thing. And I guess you can't have too many positive reviews. But that does go against some of what we're going to explore a little bit in this episode. And that is the idea of what are our virtues? What are some of our best qualities? And how can those virtues become flaws when expressed to excess?
All right.
So this is an interesting idea because, you know, you and I have been talking for a while just about what makes us, you know, we always try to like optimize ourselves and look at where are our strengths and what kinds of situations or opportunities do we thrive. And we also notice at certain moments where that very thing that makes us so successful or so unique can become counteractive at a certain point as well. And so I think as spouses, it's been nice to recognize that and maybe call that out in one another a little bit. But today we'll really talk about what this looks like and how as individuals, but also as spouses, we can help one another just avoid the excess.
All right. You want to give someone an example just so that they can get a quick laugh before we get started, or you just want to dive right in?
Yeah, well, this one isn't so funny, but I think everyone will be familiar with Brutus from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar.
Oh, yep. I bet everybody is so familiar with this. Go ahead.
That's the first one that came to my mind. This is a text I've looked at off and on for years. But Brutus is a character who is portrayed as someone who is so unassailably honest and virtuous and trusting that when thrust into a very delicate, very tumultuous political situation, that those are the very qualities that end up turning against him. So I don't need to go into detail about the story, but that's kind of the basis all the way, like going back to like Aristotle and just this idea of hamartia, or like this hubris that people have, where you have certain qualities. Often in literature, it's confidence, which then becomes pride that ends up working against a character. But you have a certain quality that is really good to have, and we all encourage one another to have those kinds of characteristics. But when you have too much of it, then it stops serving you and it stops serving the people around you. So we can all come up with like other scenarios of things that are good, but when taken to excess become harmful. I think of working out, for example. We should do this regularly, right? But at a certain point, when you're doing it too much, then you stop helping your body and you're hurting yourself instead. And I've never gotten to that point. Let's be honest here.
You're not speaking from experience, I know.
Right. But there's certainly, you could take almost anything. And I think, you know, it gets turned on its head a little bit when we overemphasize that particular facet without really taking into context the reality of how that plays out within the broader context.
Sure. So yeah, too much working out where people are then almost injuring themselves and harming themselves, that it becomes, you know, like an over exercise, and it's this, you know, it turns into a negative thing, usually hurting someone. Like too much sleep, like, right, we need to get our 8 hours of sleep, or, you know, if you're a kid, you need different amounts of sleep. But what happens when we're asleep, you know, 12 to 14 hours a day? Like, sleep is good, but when taken to excess, right, kind of out of a normal healthy range, like what is the underlying cause, and what does that mean? What's going on with you?
Right.
You know, we talked about this last season when we were like, you know, you can't stay in paradise forever. Like, it's great. Endless cocktails at the pool, sunshine, you know, idleness, great. But, right, what is idleness is the devil's handwork. Like all of these things where it's like too many things that are good in and of themselves in normal, manageable doses, when put into excess, then have the opposite effect.
Yeah, so we're almost picturing a spectrum, and right in the middle of that spectrum is like that healthy balance. And you can have too little of some of these things as well.
Sure.
But we're really focusing on the other end of the spectrum where you have too much. I also think of just entertainment, for example. Like having just enough entertainment in your life is good and appropriate. But when we treat that as our default, then we have like a Brave New World complex where our entire life revolves around the constant stimulation and the good feelings that we expect.
Well, and even I think of this situation, we've had all of these different kind of grocery stores open up in the area. And one is Woodman's. I haven't even been in yet, but it's like, bigger than as big as our town. I mean, it's just huge. But there are so many options, too many options, right? You go to buy a loaf of bread and you're looking at an aisle with 60 choices. And it's like, it just like me, it like freezes me and I don't know where to look and I can't find what I'm looking for. I no longer know what I'm looking for because it's too many.
Yeah.
Like, God bless America. We have all the options and all the flavors and all the choices, but when it boils down to it,
it becomes paralyzing. Yeah.
Right.
And that's somewhere behind you is Barry Schwartz's too much of a paradox of choice. And that's exactly what that conundrum of like having too many options. We see this with entertainment too. Like, our kids have a lot of choices for their entertainment, and that leads to like just bickering and I almost wish there was just one channel that showed one thing, and then just take away all choice, and then you have no choice except to be satisfied with it.
Because that's your choice.
That's all there is, right? Anyway, but in this episode, we want to talk more about our personal characteristics, and then let that lead into some broader questions that maybe some of you listening can carry with you into your own conversations as well.
Okay. So before we dive into that, let's revisit. Also, was it in season 4? We talked about the Enneagram and we brought in some books. And really the point of the Enneagram, it's to examine how humans are wired both positively and negatively. And the whole point of like learning that is to help you figure out like who you are and why you stumble into some of the self-defeating patterns that we fall into just because of how we're wired and how we interpret things. And so we had taken a look at the Enneagram and we had taken some quizzes. We had recommended some to you. And then we had determined our Enneagram numbers. And so while we could identify with several numbers and while we have wings of numbers, it turned out that I was a 2, which was the helper, and you were a 5, which Jordan didn't settle. He's a 5. He's a 9. He's a 3.
This is not an Enneagram episode, but that's one tool that you can use to just explore some of your areas of giftedness, but also areas of potential excess and struggle.
Right. So we looked at that just to use like, these are our gifts, but when we have too much of those, right? When we're not in a healthy balance zone, when some of those take over, how we can see how too much of them kind of defeats like what we're trying to do and who we are.
Mm-hmm. So which one of us do you want to talk about first? Or do we go back and forth?
I don't know. Do you want to start with, let's start with me. That's fine. Okay. So I'm just going to go and read part of this real quick.
What are you reading from?
So this is from The Road Back to You, an Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery. So it's a book that I had picked up years ago. So it says 2s, right? So we're talking about like if I'm a helper, right? That's just kind of how I'm characterized. 2s are some of the most caring, kind, supportive, upbeat, and tenderhearted peoples on God's green earth. That's just what the book says, okay? I'm not tooting my own horn.
I would agree with that.
Okay. It says 2s are the first responders in a crisis, the last to leave a dinner party if there are still dishes to wash. In Enneagram speak, they're called the helpers. So that's kind of like me at my best. Like I would say I could identify with that. Now there are more descriptors. But it does say this. Pride is the deadly sin of the 2, which sounds nonsensical because 2s appear to be more selfless than self-inflated. But pride lingers in the shadows of our hearts. It reveals itself in the way we focus all of our attention and energy on meeting the needs of others while at the same time giving the impression that we have no needs of our own. 2 believes other people are more needy than they are and that they alone know best what others require. And so we get really, really focused on others. And sometimes 2s believe they live in a world in which you have to be needed before you can be loved, and where you have to give to get. And because they don't believe you'll keep them around if they've ever failed to render your service, 2s find it hard to put a cap on the time and energy they'll devote to taking care of someone else.
Interesting. So Do you see any wisdom in that description?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Yeah, I really do. If I think about just like my role in terms of like my friends, my family, our household, and even how sometimes I perceive what I need to do to be loved in return, I feel like I go from what can be my virtue, helping others. And for me, it doesn't, there's other twos, like if you're very unhealthy, that it's all about like tit for tat and it becomes like narcissistic.
Yeah,
I don't,
I haven't seen that in you. This is not extreme, but there's
there's
moments
a
where yeah.
range, but I do think that I wear myself out to show up for others. And I did not realize that I did that until like a couple years ago. Like, and then I started putting kind of boundaries in where it's like, I can't be your everything. I can't be this person's, like, I've got my own life. I've got my own family. Like I have to be protective of that. You know, I have to be protective of my time, and I'm still going to love people. I'm still going to show up, but I can't overly extend myself to the point where I am exhausted. And I had gotten to that point.
Yeah. Can I share an anecdote that stood out to me just from the other day?
Okay, sure.
Okay. So first of all, like I think at times this wasn't in this description, but I think it fits that sometimes you kind of invent a need or a role or make an existing role like bigger than it needs to be, like for the sake of you fulfilling that. And that's when I think it becomes stressful for you. You're like, now I've got to like carry this in addition to these other things. And I want to just encourage you to be like Rosanna, like it's okay to take a step back or to do something smaller, to delegate this, or like have a more realistic perspective of what's actually needed here. So my anecdote was the other day, Leo, was it, I don't know, Saturday or Sunday? He was just like very excited about making breakfast for everyone. Every once in a while, we do a family breakfast. And I think he was also banned from screens for the morning.
So he had a lot of extra
He
time.
had a lot of energy. So he's like, let's make breakfast. So he and I start doing this together. We make waffles and then we take out some eggs. And then like you had come downstairs and seen what we were doing. And then like you immediately like take out breakfast sausage and like you're like taking out just the couple things needed to like put that in the oven as well. And at that point, it was kind of like, what the heck? Like we had this covered. We could have easily done the breakfast sausage as well. So this is very minor, but I think that this typifies some of the bigger things I want you to be alerted to. And that is that like no one invited you. Nobody needed you at that moment. Yeah.
But I think you need me. And I think, oh, well, why don't I help them? Because this would make their life easier. It doesn't matter that it complicates my morning. Yeah.
So that anyway, like that is just like a small moment, and it was helpful. But at the same time, it's like we've got this. We could have easily handled that as well, or maybe we didn't want that. But just kind of inventing this need for yourself, and then like involving yourself in a moment where you could have more easily just been like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to go do what I want to do for the next 20 minutes until this is all ready. And then I can come down and enjoy this. You kind of like created the work for yourself in that moment that otherwise would have been fine without you.
And I definitely realized that, and you had pointed that out to me like later on in the day. And in some ways I was like offended by it. But then I kind of realized like, yeah, like why didn't I just take that extra like 25 minutes to myself? Like, right. It was a cloudy Saturday or Sunday morning. I should have curled up with my book in bed and not cared what was happening. But like, just because that's like my natural inclination is to help, right? Where I see there's a need, even if I haven't been invited, like I continue to do that. And so like, that's why I had gotten to the point of kind of feeling burnt out. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I can see like why even too much of a good thing is bad. Mm-hmm. Because I'm causing some stress. You know, in the last episode, we talked about, you know, your mom's memorial coming up. And even that, like I'm putting some pressure on myself to do a lot of things that probably don't need to be done. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I almost can't even help it because like, that's my job. Like I do those things. And so, you know, just that reassurance of like, what part of this can you delegate to others? Mm-hmm. And having people like give me those words and that permission to like, it doesn't mean I can't proceed with excellence or do something nice, even from the right places, that I don't have to do it all.
Yeah. And I feel like, and you do a wonderful job with the memorial and with everything that you touch. Like it's just done really well. And I think that kind of becomes your own expectation of yourself. Like, I've got this. And then in a way, just as your spouse, I sometimes feel boxed out. Like, well, Rosanna's got this, so I don't really have a right or a role to be involved with this, whatever it may be. And there's like too much pressure on yourself, but at the same time, I think there's easier, more manageable ways to go about things that either we do it together, or there's some things that just maybe don't need to be done as well. And then I see like the stress, like now I've got X, Y, and Z going on, and it's all on me. And you've even verbalized like this is my role, this is my job. And how many times have I been like, but is it really? you know?
Yeah.
Or I think there's like more tempered ways to exploit your skill without it becoming harmful to you. And that's what I worry about. Like, do everything that you can, but at a certain point when you feel like it becomes burdensome to you, then I think that should be your cue to,
Like a check.
yeah, like to more realistically assess what is it that I could actually be doing here.
Well, and even you saying that right now, like that I've boxed you out. And that's my fault. And then sometimes when I want you to step up, like I've never kind of put these two things together until now. But I've boxed you out from certain things for so long that it's like, right? Like you don't feel the need to step in or do those things, or like then I suddenly expect you to do them and you're kind of like out of your element because I've kept you out of it for so long. So it's like
I can do it, but how do I operate in Rosanna's world for this given task or event?
And so it's part of my fault for keeping you out in certain ways and in certain instances. But then I suddenly expect you to like hop back in. But like if you haven't been doing, whatever the task is ever, right? Because I've always done it. Then how am I going to expect you to like walk in and just handle it the way I want it handled?
Right. Well, that last part is critical too, because I could do it. Like whatever the task is, like I would have my own way of doing it.
I want you
I've
to
been
do it.
very successful at
Sure.
anything else that I've endeavored to do, whether it's in the household or beyond. So you kind of need to let go a little bit as well. So I mean that's what we're getting at is in general, like recognizing here's like the areas of strengths and giftedness, and when we're at our prime, this is what it looks like. But at a certain point, it's like there's that paradox of when does a set of grains of sand become a pile, right? Is it when it's 3 grains of sand? Is it when it's 15 grains of sand? Is it when it's 100 grains? At what point does it go from just these separate grains of sand to a pile? I think the same thing is with these virtues as well. At what point does like exercising some of these skills and healthiest parts of who we are transition into something that's flawed?
Right. Well, and if you think about people who are like very independent, right? Like why that's great. But then when they're too independent, right? Like how does that keep other people out of their lives? How does that harm them from finding a partner to share their life with? It's, like it's great to be independent, but in the right like balance and consistency and time frame and all of that. But then you have to learn how to be like interdependent and codependent. And
Are you talking about me, or is this just an example?
that was just an example, but I mean, I could kind of see that.
Okay.
Are you like itching to get into you? Or do you have more to say about me?
Well, I think there's other things as well, and maybe this is more funny. Maybe we should have mentioned this first, but we talked about how you're very organized as well. Like the whole household runs like a well-oiled machine, to use the cliche. But then when this is to excess, like just the joke of you're already putting something away that we're still using, you're already cleaning up while we're still in the process of making the mess, in a sense.
Yeah.
Like I swear I took a pen out yesterday. I was going to write something down, and then I went to go use it. The pen was already put away. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you put it away.
Well, we were at Sunday dinner with my parents and we were cleaning up the table and my mom was like putting leftovers in containers, but I didn't realize that that's what she was doing because I wasn't like looking at one counter, but then I saw the lids out. So then I put them back in the drawer. So like I turned around, put them in the drawer. My mom turned around to grab the lids and said, I swear I just had lids here. So when you were telling me this example, I laughed out loud because like I do that all of the time because I like everything has a place and I like surfaces to be clean but like to excess it drives everybody else nuts.
Yeah. And I think that's more humor. So because it's not like the harm is very minimal.
Oh yeah, I'm not harming anybody.
But that makes me think of like what expectations do you have for others like to operate along the same level of expediency or organization? And I think that might be where it can become slightly harmful as well. I mean, it's good to help others, like our kids in particular, like be organized and on top of things. But at a certain point, and I'm not saying that we've gotten there, like that could become somewhat detrimental as well.
And you know what, I was thinking about that the other day. Was it because I had worked a wedding? Whatever the scenario was, I came home, and in this room that we're recording in, there was like a train track built all over the floor and a marble run, and it had been out for like multiple days, and the bins are in. And you know, like when I walk by, I kind of cringe because, like, again, like I like things like cleaned up right away and put in their place. You know, if someone came through the front door, you know, we've got toys everywhere. You know, what would they say? Yeah. Right. And that's just me. That's how I'm wired. I get that I'm weird. Not everybody's like that. But I had to I took a step back for a second, and you'd be proud of me because I thought to myself, my kids are engaged and they're playing. They're not on a screen. They're not yelling at each other. They're not fighting. Like, they're having a good time. And so, like, I will allow that. Right. Mm-hmm. And then after maybe the third day, I'll say, okay, it's time to clean it up. But, you know, like because I'm not naturally like that, like, right? Like in my mind, I have to be like, okay, shift it to the left a little, Rosanna. Like, this is fine. This is good. Like, see what they're doing. Like, and then I move on. So it's like, yeah, I have to keep it in check. Like, right. My natural inclination is to be one way, but that's not always good, especially in terms of our kids.
Yeah. So I'm sure there's more that we can reflect on about one another too, but those are two that obviously have come up with us before and are worth exploring. All right, I guess it's my turn because I see you thumbing the book
through the Enneagram book.
Yeah, eagerly about to read about, what is this, about Enneagram 5?
You know, and this is why I like talking about it, because anybody who like knows us and knows me and how I feel about you, I adore you. I think you're amazing. Like, I even get choked up. Like, I thought by now maybe I'd be sick of you or that it would be old, but it's not. I love you. Mm-hmm. And even the things that are annoying are like not even really that annoying. So I think
endearing.
They're endearing.
It's on a spectrum. It goes from annoying to endearing.
I understand who you are and I understand like your thought process. So like I get it. Doesn't mean it's not annoying, but I get it. Mm-hmm.
So side question based off of that. Too much of a good thing. Is it possible to spend too much time together? Or to love each other too much?
Ooh, good question. I don't feel like that with you.
I don't know. I would say, yeah. Like, I would say the answer is yes, but we've never gotten to that point.
Well, maybe that's, yeah.
Right. But you have, we have imagined, like, what if our entire identity was kind of like wrapped up with the other person? Then I think it becomes constraining to who we are.
And you know what? I think when we were younger and I didn't know enough about love and it was more that like infatuation and like just kind of being obsessed with like there's this person who loves me,
like a spouse or boyfriend is going to complete you.
Or completely fill your bucket or do everything right or understand you all of the time. And after we were married and even after we had kids, like I realized I'm like, you're my favorite person and I love you, but like you loving me is not going to solve all my problems and it's not going to complete me. Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, these last like 10 years where I've been figuring out like who I am and what I need, like has been the most beneficial.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to get to that point where the time that we have with one another, the love that we have is excessive.
And you're like, I just need a break.
Right. We've never gotten there yet. No. But in theory, like that is possible too.
Okay. So you mostly identified with the Enneagram as a 5, what's the 5 is the investigator, which here it says, I think I am, therefore I am, I think. Typically introverted and analytical, 5s don't believe they have enough inner resources or energy to meet the demands of life. Actually, that I probably shouldn't have underlined that. That's not really you.
Yeah, some of these descriptions, I'm like, yeah, that's really good. And other ones, it's like, yeah.
So, but I would say that you are very analytical. And while you do like being with people, you are kind of introverted in the sense that like you're very thoughtful. You're always thinking, you're in your mind a lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're not personable. People meet you and they really like you. But you're in your head. Like there oftentimes like I look over at you at the car and you're actually like mouthing something. You're like talking and you're thinking through something.
I move my lips when I talk to my imaginary
when he talks to
people.
himself. Yeah. And I'm like, who are you talking to? And what are you talking about? He's like, nothing. But 5's excessive desire for acquiring knowledge, information, ideas, conceptual models, expertise, interesting facts, and understanding for how things work. 5s look to knowledge to provide them with what most people find through relationships such as love, comfort, and support. And so I've always called you that. Like you're a little more cerebral. You're like all about like understanding facts, knowledge, information. And like, you can do that like nobody I've seen. Like, I read something, I learn it, it's like gone. Yours is like, it's filed, like it's a foundation for some other kind of like learning, and you can like pull these pieces from different domains together. Like, you're like you're like a head guy, like you're in your head. And I think sometimes, although you are like a devoting and loving husband and father, I really think sometimes like it's hard for you to share thoughts and feelings. It's hard for you to listen to advice of others because you've already figured it out in your head and you're not like as open to it. And it's, over the last few years that you've been like a little bit more relationally focused, where like you've been like, like, yeah, I could read these books and I could learn all of these things, but you're like, one of my goals is to like be more social with friends. One of your goals has been to find more friends. Like, you're kind of like realizing that like you can only be in your mind so much, that it becomes a detriment, where it's like, yeah, what are you really like living and applying if you're always
Well, what I've
thinking?
noticed too is that I think that a piece of that is relying on order, like especially like order to my day. We've talked about that. So I know I need to understand like not just what's happening now, but what's coming up, and that has limited my flexibility or even my attuneness to others. Because in my mind, like the map is already laid out for the thoughts to have or the actions to take. So any new information is just flat out like difficult for me to process. And so people will notice things about what's going on around them or what's going on with other people. And I'm just completely naive to it.
Right. One of the things it says about fives is that they're minimalists, which I've called you before,
Oh, hey,
which
yeah.
you were offended by. They don't need or want too many things. In their minds, like the more that they have, like the more they have to pay attention to those things. And then like that
Can't
takes
stand the
away,
clutter.
that takes away from like, like doing what they want. Cause then they have to like attune to these other things.
An ordered environment is an ordered mind.
I think this is funny. Unfortunately, fives' desires to keep life simple and economical can reveal itself in their appearance. They don't win fashion shows, and they probably don't have nice cars either. Like, you are just, although you dress nice, it's because I dress you.
What about a purple shirt the other day? You gave me such flack for it,
It was really the ugliest shirt I've ever seen, especially for what you paid
but
for
it works on me.
So
Actually, if anyone watching the video right now, you see like this shirt that I'm wearing is one of probably 6 shirts that are identical, just different colors. Yeah.
Yep.
And I love that. Monochrome. All right, go on. So are these are like,
So these are just like
mild critiques? What
right.
are the excesses or the flaws there?
It says fives can be a bit difficult to get to know because they only share generally like who they are. They don't like, they're just like, they don't have time. Like, they're kind of like too busy with like their own time and what they want to do, like to like be, to like give. And so
Yeah,
you're like a little more guarded. You're in your mind. And so you might
People have
think a
said
lot.
that, yeah, which I think is interesting because I feel like whatever I say is honest and authentic, but maybe I just don't have as I don't know. I don't have as much to say, or like, what do you do as a 2? Speaking as a 2, like, what do you do to be so charming and personable that I, as a 5, lack?
Well, it's like you're so, I don't want to say obsessed because it's not like that, but like to collect knowledge and information because you don't want to appear foolish or uninformed. You're like always worrying about saying the right thing. You're not really like listening. You're not really looking at social cues. You're not looking at people's body languages, where I'm like leaning in and like making people feel warm and fuzzy. And you're like kind of just like, if you're not engaged with what they're saying, you're kind of like, you're looking at them, but you're somewhere else. And so you're not really paying attention and you're not really like investing in them. You're thinking like, this doesn't pertain to me. I don't really care. So it kind of like keeps you closed off from people. It doesn't mean you don't care, but it's like your own knowledge and your own wanting to do your own thing keeps you back from people sometimes. And so that's something that we've talked about. Now, you and I like had established a time where we were doing more of like kind of sharing like what was really on our minds. And I mean, I've seen a
That's been very
huge
helpful.
transition from you over the last few years. And I think you've started to relate to people differently. And I think people have seen you differently in the last few years. And I'm not saying that, you can't study and obtain knowledge, but then there's like this from learning to doing. Sometimes there's a disconnect. It's like you've got all the knowledge, but it's the lack.
It can be
the lack of,
paralyzing at times too.
correct.
Yeah.
It takes you longer to make a decision. to know what you want, to weigh all the options, to balance every chart and every budget. And like, while that's really good and it's really smart and it's long-term amazing for our family, sometimes you don't lead with your heart, right? You don't like just be like, screw it. You rarely get there. You did that the other day. You're like, let's go out to dinner. I was like, are you okay? Like, what? So it's just, things like that where, even sometimes while you are loving and while we have a great relationship, sometimes you seem closed off because you're just like in your head. And I kind of have to like draw that out.
Well, I think that's important because I'm not closed off, but I could seem that way to others just because, my life is I'd say like a very like internal mental one. Always
Mental game, yeah.
always thinking through things. Doesn't always translate very well to reality.
Which I always like. I like very much live out loud.
Yeah.
Every thought, every feeling, where I'm at, whether you like it or not, like you're hearing it. So at least you know where I'm at. Sometimes I'm looking at you like, where are you?
Yeah.
So,
All right. So a lot of that is just for us to work through that. Was there anything else that you wanted to point out about me?
no,
Okay.
like I said,
That was the main.
I adore you.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's nice to be adored. And also with you.
Okay, moving on.
So questions. So I think this comes back to, at what point does a virtue become a flaw?
I think it when it makes other people uncomfortable. Don't you think?
Is it about other people? Like, can it be, I would say like when harm is done, and that harm can be very mild, but when it's like counteractive to the purpose, which it could be harming yourself as well. So I'm
Okay,
just,
right.
I'm just
In
thinking about
my
you.
example, yeah, it's usually to my detriment. It's usually not right. I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to kill myself as long as it makes you happy or it makes your life easier. And I don't think of myself in the equation. Like, if this isn't good for me, then maybe it's something I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. And probably as your spouse, I see both sides of you, whereas others may see more like that front-facing, like super competent, caring servant. I'll see maybe some of the after effect of that too, when you are stressed and are unsure of how to serve yourself.
Yeah. So when there's harm to yourself or to someone else, right?
Yeah. But
And not harm like physical harm, but I'm meaning like
loosely interpreted.
right,
Yeah.
like hurt feelings, right? Walls being like put up, people instead of receiving what you have as like a gift or a talent, where it makes them recoil.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it.
Yeah. And that can be hard to see too. Like even so how do you, if these are like skills or virtues, I guess what do you say to like not express that as much, right? Like I think of Brutus in Shakespeare's play. Like he was trying to be honest and honorable and trusting. Like what's the counter to that? Like, don't be so trusting. That's what people tell him in the story before he's ultimately politically defeated, right? Don't be so trusting. Don't be so honest. And he's like, no, like forget it. Like I'm gonna either like I'm gonna live with these virtues or die with these virtues.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's hard, right? It kind of, you have another question here that says, what role does a spouse play towards bringing out the best and avoiding the excess? I think you have to be true to who you are. And with the Enneagram, that's what it says. It's like, this is who you are, right? Whether you identify with some of these traits or not. Like, this is kind of your default. This is where you are. But you do need people to kind of help guide you and keep you in check. Like, yeah, these are all good, but in excess, like, or depending on your audience or depending on what you're trying to accomplish, sometimes who you are at like that default mode is not going to fly, right? The helper can't ask for help. Like, that's not fair. So like you need someone to like help you in that situation. Be like, hey, you're taking this on. This is great. Maybe you need a hand with that. Have you thought of, delegating some of that? Have you thought of bringing someone onto your business? Have you thought of not, if someone asks you to do something, do it, but not volunteering yourself when you don't have the time. Like, you need those people in your ear to guide you, because to excess, you can be hurting yourself or others.
I feel like Jerry Maguire, like, help me help you.
There you go. Movie reference. But it's true. Like, help me help you.
Well, I think you have to like help each other stay grounded as well. I mean, you and I spend a lot of time thinking about like, who do we want to be, and our habits and decisions in line with that bigger vision of who we want to be. And then I think like let's compare recent decisions to these core principles of who we're pursuing. Do those add up? And that really requires constant reflection, right? Any new event in our lives, any new interaction is a chance to kind of weigh it against this. And it's hard to see. You can't see your own face, so let someone else be a mirror for you. I think that's the role the spouse plays. Is let's replay what happened. Is that aligning with our understanding of who it is you're trying to make yourself into?
Right. Or if these are our values, right? If like relationships and family are a core value for us. But some of like the goals and other things we're building in are like putting those two things at odds, right? Like where it's like making our family uncomfortable, or like, right? Like what has to change,
Just
what
we're
has to
stressed
shift.
out, so we become worse parents,
Right.
where we lash out at our kids or withdraw from them. Like we don't want that to happen either.
Right. And what do we want out of those relationships that we have with people? Are we alienating people because of something we're doing? It doesn't mean we need to be less of who we are, but like, how does that come off to certain people? Like, how do we need to kind of like maybe reposition or rethink what we're doing or how we interact? And so, it's like that constant check of like goals versus values versus, you have to kind of keep it all in line.
Yeah. All right. So I have one last fun question, and that is, can you ever have too little of a bad thing? Right? Because we're talking about too much of a good thing. Can you ever have too little of a bad thing?
I guess it depends on like what those qualifiers are of too little of a bad thing. Like, yeah. Can we have too little idleness in our life where we're always on the go, where we're always trying to achieve, where we're always trying to like overproduce? Yeah, right? Some idleness is good, right? A break from the norm, right? Can you ever have too little sweets? I think you can. I really think you can, right? Like we've told ourselves like we can't have sugar.
Life
we
is
can't
short
have,
enough as it is.
Right. We
Yeah.
can't have sugar.
I'm
We
having
can't
the
have
pizza.
this. We can't have that. I've cut this out of my diet, that out of my diet. Like I remember when I like kind of changed even just the way that I was eating. Like I told myself the one thing I would not give up was coffee creamer in my coffee. I don't want skim milk. I didn't want oat milk. No, I want fat, sugary creamer in my coffee. Like I was not going to like draw that line. So it's like, like let's give up all of these things, but like let's have some balance, because too much one way or too much the other is no good. But
Yeah.
where's the healthy balance?
I'm thinking of Benjamin Franklin's moral perfection. He says,
Oh wait, stop. I'm thinking about Dunkin' Donuts extra creamy coffee creamer, and you're thinking about Benjamin Franklin.
There you
I love it.
I'm a
Go ahead.
5. But he says, I at a certain point in my life, I decided that I wanted to live without committing any fault at any time. And then he comes up with a process for doing that. So that's like really noble, right? He really wants to live with like all of the good and like never make a wrong decision, never do something immoral. But then if you look at he makes like 13 virtues for himself and briefly defines them. A lot of it is like just having balance. So he talks about like eating, for example. He says, eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. And so he's trying to strike a middle ground with a lot of those virtues. With other ones, it is a little bit more like erring on the side of being high, like being industrious, for example, was like he's very, there's no balance with that. He's
High producing.
Yeah, he makes the most of every minute. But I thought that was interesting with a lot of the other ones. Like he's saying like I'm not going to like only eat like these very highly specified diet. I'm going to eat not to dullness. So he'll still eat good food, but he's going to throw in some things that keep his diet from being dull, right? But then avoiding the excesses at either end of the spectrum. So I think that there's certainly like just some flat out immoral things that have to be avoided. Like you can have even like a moment or a dose of a bad thing can be highly detrimental. But then I think there's other things, like we'll call them maybe indulgences, that are totally in bounds and make life a little bit more fun as long as they're within reason.
Well, and I did a video on Instagram a long time ago where I was talking about balance, and like that nothing is ever going to be completely in balance. And part of it, it's like we always talk about like playing the long game and just being consistent, like consistently being in check with things. It doesn't mean that you can never have something or that you can overindulge, but it's like that consistency. We were just talking about like exercise and working out. And we were talking about like how consistent we've been. And then, September hit with your mom, like end of August, beginning of September. And it kind of just derailed kind of like, just everything in our life was derailed for a while. And it's like, you know what? It's okay to take a break. It's okay to be off. It's okay to have some comfort food. It's okay to like be so emotionally drained that you can't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to work out, because you know what your body needs is your body needs rest, and it needs extra rest. And so if I was sleeping 14 hours a day, that would be to excess, right? But to get an extra hour and a half to 2 hours of sleep a day, and just to like say to the workout, screw it. Like, I'm not going to undo everything I've done over the last 5 years, and to know that is a good thing. So, I mean, it's never going to be perfectly in balance, right? I think of the car, when you do the fade in the balance of the speakers of like where it needs to be, you know, sometimes it's in the front, sometimes
it's
in the
kid
back.
songs. Yeah. You really turn it up in the
You
rear.
throw it in the back. And so just knowing that, like, you know, too much of a good thing can be bad. Maybe sometimes too little of a bad thing is no good either, but that we're looking for like long-term consistency, and having someone in your corner or multiple people in your corner to be the mirror for you when you can't see when it's out of balance, or, you know, when you can see that it's causing even that person harm. Like, you know, what does being in your own mind all the time, what does that do to you? What does that do to others? And just talking through it. I think that's important.
Yeah. Right. Well, as usual, we hope that just hearing a little bit of us kind of work through who we are, for better or worse, inspires you to do the same with yourselves and your significant others around you. And speaking of too much of a good thing, like we said at the beginning, you can never have too many 5-star ratings and reviews. So feel free to throw one online and visit the relentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can learn more information and sign up for our email newsletter subscription. So nice talking to you all again this week, and we'll look forward to having our next episode next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you are encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are two great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
And relentlessly pursuing what matters.